Picture this. The most powerful woman in the Ottoman Empire, the wife of the ruler of half the known world, simply vanishes into thin air. No warning, no body, no ransom demands. Just a void in the heart of the harem and the throne room that stretched on for 2 long years. This was the narrative bomb, detonated by the creators of Magnificent Century when, in episode 101, Hurrem Sultan disappeared without a trace. This moment wasn't just another plot twist, it was a total rupture of the series' familiar reality. Viewers, accustomed to witnessing every intrigue, every tear, and every smile of Hurrem under Suleiman's gaze, were suddenly left in complete darkness. What really happened to her? Who dared to lay a hand on the Sultan's own? And most importantly, why couldn't they find her for so long? It all begins with a blow to the most vulnerable spot, a mother's heart. Hurrem receives a letter. Her son, Prince Selim, is gravely ill. Without a second thought, she rushes to Konya, falling into a perfectly laid trap. The attack on her carriage, a moment of fear, and then she vanishes without a trace, leaving behind only a ringing emptiness and her ring, which would later become a key piece of evidence and the symbol of this entire saga. While Mustafa vies for power in the harem, and the young Mirima, with her characteristic perceptiveness, quickly deduces that the letter was a forgery, Suleiman is plunged into darkness. His search is the desperation of a man willing to turn the empire upside down, yet he keeps hitting a wall of silence. It seemed as if Hurrem had simply vanished into thin air. Pulling the strings behind this drama was a figure whose thirst for revenge proved stronger than family ties. Hatice, the Sultan's sister, who never came to terms with the execution of Ibrahim Pasha, had become the architect of another's nightmare. She didn't just hire men, she meticulously nurtured this plan, using Hurrem's own weakness as a weapon against her. The place of her confinement resembled not a prison, but a slow torture of oblivion. A secluded house on the edge of the empire, an elderly woman and her son as guards, meager food once a day, and constant fear. It was here, within these walls, that Hurrem underwent a crucial metamorphosis. She didn't just survive, she was tempered. The news of her son Mehmed's death, received in captivity, became that point of no return, where despair crystallized into cold resolve. Captivity transformed the once passionate concubine into a calculating strategist, hatching plans for revenge. The resolution came 2 years later when the loyal Bali Bey finally found Roxolana's trail. Let's be real. When we hear harem, our imagination paints a picture of a luxurious but vulnerable women's club. The reality, however, was more like a hybrid of the Pentagon, an elite university, and a maximum security prison. For an outsider to get in here was harder than trying to bypass airport security with a fake passport today. And the facial recognition system and access control were managed by unique specialists, the eunuchs. Don't think of them as mere guards. Think of a multi-tiered security corporation. Its staff was divided into departments. White eunuchs from the Caucasus and the Balkans worked the outer perimeter, like modern-day liaison officers. But the black eunuchs, mostly from Africa, were the special forces, the elite of internal security. They lived right next to the server, in cramped barracks by the harem gates, and their work never stopped. Their boss, the Kuzlar Agassi, chief black eunuch, was essentially the CEO of this ultra-secretive operation. His office was at the very epicenter, right by the harem gates. His rank in the empire was third, right after the Grand Vizier and the Sheikh-ul-Islam. This is like if the head of security at Apple was the third most powerful person in the United States. He personally approved every connection request to the harem and monitored all incoming and outgoing data traffic. But their job wasn't just about standing by doors. Their authority was all-encompassing. Security guards, no man except the Sultan could cross the threshold. System administrators, they were responsible for the concubine's education, kept track of schedules, and escorted the women to their meetings with the Sultan.
moderators. For serious offenses, they could apply the ultimate ban, including drowning in the Bosporus. And now, the system's key life hack that made the eunuchs supremely influential. They had a direct line to the top admin, the Sultan himself. They could approach him at any hour of the day or night. In the age of Hurrem, this back door became a key to real power. The eunuchs weren't just guardians of the harem, they were the guardians of secrets, couriers in political intrigues, and even investors in the change of rulers. This is precisely why the scenario of a simple kidnapping of a concubine from the harem is a historical nonsense. It wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. Because the harem wasn't just a building with guards. It was a living, breathing organism, every cell of which was controlled by a security system perfected over centuries and utterly unprecedented. There was only one way to get in, by becoming a part of it, and only two ways to get out, by the Sultan's will or in a sack at the bottom of the Bosporus.
So where do the disappearance stories come from? This is where it gets interesting. Women did vanish without a trace, but the hand behind it belonged not to external villains, but to internal players. The Valide Sultan, the chief executive of the harem, could secretly eliminate or exile a disgraced concubine. These weren't kidnappings. They were carefully orchestrated internal purges. Imagine being fired without severance or notice, but in the Ottoman context, that termination could mean lifelong imprisonment or a sack in the waters of the Bosporus. Palace intrigues were far more effective and discreet than any external assault. What about pirates and ransoms? Also a myth? Not entirely. This is where we find a grain of truth. Yes, Maltese corsairs or other pirates could attack a ship transporting concubines or even a pasha's family members. But this happened at sea, far from the walls of Topkapi. It's like stealing an armored truck on its way to the bank. Yes, you get the money, but it doesn't mean you've robbed Fort Knox itself. Such episodes were rare, painful for the port's prestige, but had nothing to do with the harem's core security. And finally, what about escapes? Here, history blends with folklore. Ottoman chronicles don't document any verified successful escapes. Instead, there are cautionary legends, something like scary stories for young concubines. Tales circulated of a few girls attempting to flee through secret passages, only to be caught by the eunuchs and punished severely, often by death or imprisonment. Historians view these more as parables, meant to demonstrate that the harem's walls were not just velvet and gold, but also an unbreakable cage.
Forget everything you've seen in the TV series. The real story of Roxolana is not a script about pirates and secret escapes from the harem. It's a much deeper and more strategic plot, the story of how a captive rewrote her destiny from within the very heart of the empire. It all began with a tragic, yet unfortunately common event of the time. During a raid by the Crimean Tatars, a young girl, likely from the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, was captured. Her life was split into a before and an after. Through Crimean trade routes, she arrived in Istanbul and ultimately found herself at the epicenter of Ottoman power, the Sultan's harem. And it was here that an astonishing transformation began. In the harem, a complex social institution with a strict hierarchy and rules, she was given a new name, Hurrem, meaning the joyful one. And this name became her first victory. Among the many other women at the court, she managed to attract the attention of Suleiman the Magnificent not only with her beauty, but with her sharp intellect, charisma, and unyielding inner strength. Her rise was not easy. It was shaped by a complex rivalry with Mahidevran, the mother of the heir apparent, Mustafa. This was a struggle for influence in the future, typical of palace life. But Hurrem proved herself a brilliant tactician and diplomat, even managing to earn the respect of Suleiman's mother, the Valide Sultan, a tremendous achievement for a foreign woman. Then she achieved the unthinkable. For centuries, Ottoman sultans did not formally marry their concubines, but Hurrem became the first woman whom Suleiman took as his lawful wife. This step was not merely a romantic gesture, but a genuine revolution that changed her status forever. It was a clear signal. You are not just a favorite. You are my only wife. And she lived up to that trust completely. The historical Roxolana was not merely an inhabitant of the harem. She was a diplomat actively corresponding with European monarchs, a philanthropist and patron on whose initiative mosques, bathhouses, and schools were built in the capital. She was the mother of the future Sultan, Selim II, whose influence on state affairs was felt for many years after her passing. Therefore, her destiny is not the story of how she was torn from her old life, but of how she, by embracing her new circumstances, managed to rebuild her destiny from the ground up. She proved that one does not have to submit to fate, but can rewrite it using intellect, will, and an unerring intuition as the primary tools.
Let's be honest, if the show's creators had stuck strictly to the history books, Hurrem would never have been kidnapped. But Magnificent Century isn't a documentary. It's a powerful drama machine where reality often takes a back seat to spectacle. And the kidnapping storyline is a perfect example of how a production crisis can be spun into ratings gold. Picture the situation. The actress, Miriam Muzerli, whose face had become synonymous with Hurrem for millions of viewers, leaves the project. The reasons? Burnout, backstage turmoil. What are the producers to do? Simply recasting the role would shock the audience and shatter the illusion. They needed a genius move that wouldn't just explain the new face, but weave it directly into the fabric of the plot. And they found it. The kidnapping became that very teleportation device, allowing for a seamless reboot of the character. Hurrem's sudden disappearance for several years within the story's timeline was the perfect justification for her maturation and the changes in her appearance and character. It gave the audience time to get used to her absence and then mentally prepare for the return of a woman who would look different, now portrayed by Vahide Perchin. This wasn't a simple, we changed the actress. It was a, she went through hell and it changed her. Brilliant, right? But this move didn't just work on a meta level. Dramatically, it was a ticking bomb. For Suleiman, it was the ultimate test of his strength. His despair, rage, and powerlessness showed viewers new, vulnerable facets of the mighty Sultan. For Hatice, it was the culmination of her revenge. The writers were able to elevate her conflict with Hurrem to a new, deeply personal and ruthless level. For the audience, it was an agonizing mystery that kept them on the edge of their seats for weeks. Everyone was guessing, is she alive? Will she return? And how would the woman who survived captivity be changed? In the end, what could have been a disaster, the departure of the lead star, became one of the most memorable story arcs in the entire series. It's a classic case of limitations breeding creativity. The writers didn't just patch a hole in the plot, they created powerful drama that amplified the character's emotional weight and gave fans endless material for discussion.